Detroit, Michigan, Tuesday, March 25th, 2006, 3:27 p.m. In a courtroom filled with tension and silence thick enough to feel, a 13-year-old black boy stood at the edge of his fate. His name was Darius Collins. Every eye in the room was on the judge, who was seconds away from delivering a sentence that would alter Darius's life forever. But just before the gavel came down, Darius said two words that changed everything. This is not just another courtroom story. It is a reminder that in the face of injustice, even the smallest voice can carry the loudest truth. And sometimes, the most powerful disruption comes not from rage, but from honesty delivered at the perfect moment. Darius Collins had already been through more than most kids his age, targeted by a flawed justice system, misrepresented by his court-appointed attorney, and overshadowed by adults who had failed to see his humanity. He had learned to stay quiet to survive. But this time, silence would cost him everything. As Judge Raymond Ellis raised his gavel, the courtroom held its breath. Prosecutors smirked, certain their work was done. Darius's public defender avoided eye contact, his file barely open. The room was a breath away from sealing a future based on assumption and appearance. Then it happened. Darius raised his head, his voice quiet but firm. That was the moment Darius rewrote his fate, not with shouting or spectacle, but with the truth. This is the story of how those two words opened the door to buried evidence, exposed courtroom bias, and unleashed a national conversation about race, silence, and justice. Comment: truth has power if you're ready to witness how one boy's voice shook the system. Because Darius Collins didn't just save himself, he reminded all of us what happens when truth refuses to be ignored. Darius Collins was 13 years old and from the east side of Detroit. A quiet, artistic kid, he spent most of his free time sketching sneakers in his notebook, reading graphic novels at the library, and looking after his younger sister, Maya. He was the kind of kid who remembered birthdays, helped carry groceries for neighbors, and walked his sister home from school every day. But all it took was one moment, one wrong place at the wrong time, to label him something else entirely. On a rainy Thursday afternoon, Darius was walking home with Maya when they passed a convenience store. Minutes earlier, it had been robbed. The suspect had already run. No weapon had been recovered, and no stolen items were found. But Darius, tall for his age, wearing a hoodie, and with skin deemed suspicious by the responding officers, was all they needed. The squad car pulled up with urgency. Officers jumped out and barked commands. Darius barely had time to speak. "He didn't do anything. He was with me," Maya cried from the sidewalk, clutching his sketch pad that had fallen during the scuffle. One of the officers, expression blank, shoved Darius into the back seat. "Tell it to the judge," the officer muttered, slamming the door behind him. Inside the precinct, Darius was questioned without a lawyer present. No guardian, no advocate, just questions stacked with assumptions and silence in place of support. He tried to explain, but every word felt like it sank into a void. His hoodie became a threat. His quiet nature became evasive. His sketches, found in his backpack, were flipped through like evidence. No fingerprints on the scene, no security footage, no stolen property recovered. But Darius was processed anyway. The report was filed, and the story was already taking shape. A young black boy near the scene of a crime. It did not matter that he had no record. It did not matter that his sister swore he was with her the entire time. In the days that followed, his school fell silent. Teachers avoided eye contact. Friends disappeared. The weight of assumption pressed in. Even those who once praised his drawings now looked through him as if he were invisible. All because of how he looked, where he stood, and who the system thought he must be. Comment: if this hit home. Because no child should be judged before they speak, and no innocence should be erased without evidence. Judge Ronald Marks, infamous for his stern demeanor and a long record of disproportionately harsh rulings against black youth, leaned forward at the bench. His glare bore down on Darius Collins like a weight. "We don't have time for games," Judge Marks said, his voice dry and dismissive. "You were there. You fit the description. Guilty." Darius stood in the witness box, his hands trembling, eyes darting to the rows of strangers watching. The air in the courtroom was thick with tension. His lawyer sat silent, offering no help. The prosecutor looked smug, certain this was an open and shut case. The judge raised his gavel. Then it happened. Darius took a step forward and shouted, voice cracking but strong, "Judge, listen to me. What happened was—" The room froze. Even the gavel paused midair. Darius's breath came fast. He clutched something small and worn in his hand. "I was chasing my sister's sketchbook. It flew into the alley when the wind blew. That's where the guy ran past me. I wasn't stealing anything. I was running after her drawings." He reached into his pocket and pulled out the small notebook, the edges frayed, the pages dog-eared from use. "See, these are hers. That's all I had. Not a wallet, not a phone, just her drawings." He opened the notebook and held it up. The pages fluttered, revealing colorful sketches of cartoon characters, superheroes, and sneakers, all signed Maya in small, neat handwriting. Gasps and murmurs filled the courtroom. The defense attorney leaned forward, stunned. The prosecutor narrowed his eyes, suddenly uncertain. The judge stared at the notebook, his gavel still suspended. "These are the drawings the officers reported?" Judge Marks asked. Darius nodded. "They didn't ask. They just grabbed me." For the first time, the courtroom saw something different. Not a suspect, but a brother trying to protect his sister's art. A boy with truth in his voice and nothing in his hands but paper and pencil. A long silence followed. Then the judge slowly lowered the gavel. Comment: let him speak. If you believe every child deserves to be heard in court. Because sometimes the truth is hidden not in evidence, but in what no one bothered to ask. It started with a sketch. In the back row of the courtroom, a local courtroom artist named Lynn Moreno had been silently capturing the scene. She was there on assignment, expected to deliver visual impressions of the day's events. But when Darius Collins stood and cried out, "Judge, listen to me," something in her shifted. She quickly sketched his tear-streaked face, his hand holding the worn notebook, and the moment the courtroom froze. That evening, Lynn posted the drawing on Instagram, captioned with the words that had echoed through the court, "Judge, listen to me." Within hours, the image caught fire. TikTok picked it up. Twitter threads exploded. Instagram reels featured the clip of Darius's voice in the sketch, played over music and text that read, "He just wanted to be heard." The hashtag #Justice for Darius began trending globally. Influential voices joined in. Civil rights attorneys retweeted the post with commentary about the importance of child testimony. Celebrities posted the sketch alongside quotes like, "Children aren't statistics, they're stories." Public figures used the moment to call for deeper accountability in the justice system. By morning, major news outlets were covering it. Headlines read, "13-year-old interrupts sentencing with truth that shocks courtroom." Sketch goes viral. Child's words spark legal firestorm. Audio clips from the trial aired on television. Talk show hosts played the footage and invited Darius's mother and sister to appear, letting the world hear from the people behind the story. Petitions demanding an investigation into Judge Ronald Marks gained traction. One surpassed 1 million signatures in under 48 hours. Legal oversight boards began reviewing his previous cases for signs of racial bias. The courthouse that once felt like a cage now became a beacon of national attention. More importantly, Darius's words became a symbol. His voice, once ignored, was now amplified. His plea, once dismissed, was now on banners, on stages, and in classrooms across the country. Comment: thumbs up. If you believe no child should be sentenced without being truly heard. Because sometimes 2 words can wake up an entire system. The courtroom lights buzzed overhead as the case against Darius Collins took a dramatic turn. The viral attention and mounting public pressure had forced the court to halt proceedings for an emergency review. What came next would flip the narrative on its head. A local journalist, digging through city footage after Darius's story exploded online, uncovered a new angle from a nearby security camera. The grainy video showed a figure fleeing the scene, not Darius, but a taller man in dark jeans and a gray hoodie. He was running in the opposite direction of where Darius had been picked up. The footage clearly showed the suspect ducking into an alley, while Darius appeared seconds later, coming from a completely different direction, clutching his sister's sketchbook. He had not even looked back. His body language spoke not of guilt, but panic. When this evidence was presented, the courtroom shifted. Whispers filled the gallery. The judge asked for silence. More details emerged. The actual suspect? Already known to law enforcement, he had a record. He matched the original witness description exactly. But for reasons no one could explain, he had never been pursued. The arresting officers admitted they had not even reviewed external footage before booking Darius. Judge Ronald Marks tried to push back. This is circumstantial at best. We cannot derail a court process based on viral influence. But this time, Darius was not alone. His public defender, until now quiet and overwhelmed, stepped forward with unshakable resolve. "Your Honor," he said clearly, locking eyes with the bench, "this child has been failed once. He won't be failed again." A heavy pause followed. The room held its breath as Judge Marks looked from the attorney to Darius. The boy's sketchbook lay on the table in front of him, still open to a page of hand-drawn sneakers and cartoons. With a reluctant sigh, the judge picked up his gavel. Charges dismissed. The sound of the gavel echoed through the courtroom. A wave of emotion surged across the room. Darius's sister cried out softly. His mother covered her face in relief. Reporters dashed for the exits, ready to file the update. And Darius, he stood still, stunned, free. Comment: he's free if you felt that gavel drop deep in your soul. Because justice may come late, but it comes louder when the truth finally speaks. Darius Collins walked out of the courthouse with the world watching, but in that moment, all he saw was his little sister running straight into his arms. She clung to him as if she would never let go again. For the first time in weeks, Darius felt the sun on his face without the shadow of judgment. He was free. But Darius knew freedom meant more than walking out of a courtroom. It meant using his voice to make sure no one else had to stand where he did, scared and unheard. With the help of local youth justice organizations, Darius began channeling his experience into action. He collaborated with nonprofits focused on legal advocacy for minors, joining panels in youth circles where he spoke about what it meant to be accused without evidence, without fairness, without a voice. It was not just about telling his story. It was about rewriting the stories of others. He launched a project called From Pencil to Power, combining his love of sketching with advocacy. The workshops invited kids affected by the justice system to draw, write, and speak their truths. Darius led sessions in community centers, libraries, and juvenile halls, giving children safe spaces to share what they had never dared say aloud. In one of the workshops, a boy asked, "What if they don't believe me either?" Darius knelt beside him and said, "They didn't believe me at first. That's why we speak louder." Soon, Darius's impact stretched further. His story became a central part of a youth-led campaign called Know Your Rights, which aimed to educate students across the country about what to do in police encounters, how to ask for a lawyer, and how to protect themselves with knowledge. His message became a rallying cry. "I'm not the mistake they thought I was. I'm the message they needed to hear." Schools invited him to speak. Youth councils nominated him for leadership roles. What began as survival had turned into purpose. Darius still carried his sister's sketchbook everywhere he went. It had become his symbol, a reminder of the moment his truth broke through. Comment, Mike, if you believe Darius turned pain into purpose. Because sometimes the very thing meant to break us becomes the platform we rise from. Months had passed since Darius Collins walked free, but the impact of his story continued to grow. No longer just a name in a courtroom file, Darius had become a voice, powerful, clear, and determined to make others feel seen. One crisp fall morning, he stood on a stage at a middle school auditorium packed with students, teachers, and community leaders. The stage lights beamed down on him, but Darius did not flinch. This time, the spotlight was his choice. He stepped up to the microphone and looked out over the crowd. Dozens of young faces stared back, some curious, some uncertain, all waiting. Darius adjusted the mic and spoke. "It only took 2 words to change my life. Listen to me. Sometimes that's all anyone wants, just to be heard." The silence was immediate. His words landed with weight. He shared his story, from the sketchbook to the courtroom, from being silenced to being seen. He talked about fear, about not being believed, and the power of speaking anyway. He reminded them that strength does not always look loud. Sometimes it looks like standing when your knees shake. As he finished, his voice softened but stayed firm. Your voice matters. Even when they try to shut you down. Especially then. The room erupted. Students clapped and cheered. Teachers wiped away tears. One boy in the front row stood and clapped the hardest, whispering to his friend, "He sounds like me." Darius stepped back smiling, not for applause, but for connection. He now toured schools and youth centers, delivering that same message, that courage starts with voice. His sessions included sketching, storytelling, and a pledge that every student signed. "I will speak up, and I will listen." Comment, I hear you, Darius, if this story hit you deep. Because truth grows louder when one brave voice makes room for hundreds more. Darius Collins's voice did more than change his own story. It changed the system that tried to silence him. His words, just 2 of them, forced a courtroom to stop and reconsider what justice really looks like. But the ripple did not end there. Across the state and beyond, his courage became a touchstone for conversations about youth rights, systemic bias, and what it means to truly be heard. Shortly after Darius's release, Judge Ronald Marks was placed under formal ethics review. Civil rights watchdogs and legal accountability groups examined his history on the bench. Patterns emerged, patterns that had been ignored for too long. Several past cases involving young defendants were reopened. Meanwhile, lawmakers took notice. Fueled by public demand and grassroots advocacy sparked by Darius's story, a new law passed. All minors taken into custody in the state of Michigan must now be provided legal representation from the very first moment of questioning. No more silent interrogations. No more kids left alone under fluorescent lights, misunderstood and unheard. Darius did not stop with speeches and school visits. Inspired by his love for storytelling and drawing, he began working on a graphic novel based on his experience. Titled 2 Words. It weaves truth with art, offering kids a way to see themselves not just as victims of injustice, but as heroes of resilience. In a recent interview, he said, "If someone like me had this book before, maybe they'd feel braver. Maybe they'd speak sooner. Maybe they'd know they weren't alone." His story, once a nearly forgotten file, now lives on in classrooms, libraries, and court reform initiatives. More importantly, it lives on in every child who finds the strength to speak, because Darius once did. Comment: I hear you, Darius, if you believe in the power of one voice to spark change. For more stories where truth breaks through injustice, check out our next video. Subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss a story that reminds us how powerful a single voice can be. Share this story, because someone out there is waiting to be heard. Mayets.